You are listening to the global network of podcasters dedicated to the pharmacy profession. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Pharmacy benefit managers, better known as PBMs, are responsible for negotiating payment rates for a large share of prescription drugs distributed in the United States. Recently, state Medicaid systems, policymakers, and national pharmacy associations have expressed concern that certain PBMs' business practices may not be consistent with public policy goals to improve the value of pharmaceutical spending. This podcast series is all about PBM reform. Listen to the discussions, share these podcasts, and help build a new pharmacy payer system which supports our independent community pharmacies, encourages fair and transparent competition in the marketplace, and most importantly, is designed to deliver the best patient care.
Hey, this is a special episode of the PBM Reform Podcast. I'm your host, Todd Urey, founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. It's been going on since 2019. A lot has been going on in PBM reform in this nation. You put in the search term PBM reform in Google, go to the news section. There's something new happening every day, the acceleration of where this needs to go. It's so important. And that's why I'm excited about today's show. Tom DePietro is a pharmacy owner here in the great state of Pennsylvania, and he is joining me now. Tom, welcome to the PBM Reform Podcast.
Todd, it's great to be here. We've connected so many times, but we've never actually got each other face to face. So I'm very excited to talk about this. Such great momentum in the past couple of weeks and months that, it's just a great time to be able to discuss PBM reform and, we have such a great legislator on board with us that's going to be joining our conversation today. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Before
we get into this, talk to our listeners, tell them about yourself, about your business, about your pharmacy and your community.
Yeah, so I opened DePietro's Pharmacy 12 years ago, so 2012. I graduated pharmacy school in 2009, worked for a chain pharmacy right out of school, quickly realized that I just needed to have better control of being able to serve patients how I deemed appropriate. Spoke to a lot of pharmacy owners in between 2011 and 2012 prior to opening, and they all told me the horror stories. And quite frankly, I didn't believe it at that time. I didn't think something like this could exist. So, opened the pharmacy in 2012 and then quickly realized wow, there needs to be a lot of reform. And how is this stuff even allowed to be happening? But through it all, we've been a staple in our community, providing extra services that our customers and our community deserve. So it's been great. From a legislative standpoint, I felt like I've been yelling from a mountain and no one's listening. So finally, seeing some sort of success and just having engaging the community and engaging our legislators about this important topic. Because at the end of the day, it's a kitchen table subject, it affects everybody. But we've really, separated ourselves from the chains locally. We are a household name now in Northeast Pennsylvania. So I'm very proud of, the work my team does and the advocacy that, I just love being involved in pharmacy.
Victoria Elliott, CEO of the Pennsylvania Pharmacists Association, was quoted recently, and she was saying that over 140 pharmacies, community pharmacies in the state of Pennsylvania have closed. This is going to have a detrimental impact on those communities. With the recent passing of HB 1993 in the state of Pennsylvania, signed by Governor Shapiro, with all the support, bipartisan support from both sides, as well as the state House of Representatives and Senate. So it's passed. A victory for pharmacy in the state of Pennsylvania. And a shout out to Governor Shapiro. Thank you so much for all your work on this and paying attention to the insiders. This is a big event in the state of Pennsylvania, of course, but this is going to have a ripple effect throughout the nation. And we have a special guest today, our state representative, one of our state representatives, Jessica Benham, who was the architect and helped to craft and helped to drive HB 1993 to Governor Shapiro's desk. Welcome to the PBM Reform Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, Jessica, give us a summary of how HB 1993 is going to impact community pharmacy.
Absolutely. So it does a number of different things. And I think, I'm not going to be able to cover all of the nitty-gritty details, but I do want to give you all some of the highlights. I think some of the key points that I really want to emphasize is first to talk a little bit about what the legislation does on rebates. So my legislation mandates that 95% of rebates are passed back on to the health insurance plan. And right now we know that the PBMs are pocketing those things and not passing those cost savings back on. And I think that is really a problem, and it's something that my legislation fixes. So I was talking a little bit about the rebates there. One of the points that I'm a little sad about that didn't make it into the legislation was the piece about spread pricing. I wanted a ban on spread pricing, and that got amended out in the Senate, unfortunately. But they did give us a study that's going to take a look at the impact of spread pricing. And my hope is that once we have that data, we'll be able to move on for future legislation. You'll see there that point about limiting patient steering. When I first proposed the bill, there was an outright ban on patient steering. There's some limits that the bill places on it now. There's still some options for steering. It's not universally banned, but there are some more constraints, which I think is important. And because of the network adequacy provisions that say that mail order pharmacies don't count for the purposes of network adequacy for a PBM, there's going to be a ton more pharmacies that are in network, so patients can have some more choice there. It also does not allow PBMs to require consumers to order their prescriptions by mail. Certainly they can if they want to, but they're not allowed to force them to do so. They can't just forcibly transfer those prescriptions. It also gives the insurance department a ton of different oversight tools that they didn't have previously. So they're going to be able to take a better look at the books of these PBMs, and they'll be able to provide reports not just about spread pricing, but about a number of different practices that PBMs engage in. And then lastly, what I think is perhaps the most important provision of the bill, this requirement that PBM-affiliated pharmacies can't be reimbursed more than non-affiliated pharmacies for the same service. That, I think, is huge, right? We're talking about parity. A couple of things that aren't on the screen that I do want to highlight. There is a study proposed in the bill to take a look at what a reimbursement floor would mean financially for state government. I would have loved to see, I think we were looking at maybe NADAC plus 8. That didn't make it into the legislation, but my hope is that study will give us the data that we need to make the argument that no, this is not going to cost the state money. We can just eat into the profits of the PBM to make up for it. And then there was also some scope of practice changes around immunizations. As you all are very familiar with, I think the federal waiver around COVID allowing pharmacy techs to do certain things was expiring, and we just extended that practice on the state level to not have an interruption there in the provision of services. And I think that's really important. There were some discussions with doctors who were concerned about, that expanded scope, but because we weren't targeting the youngest children, which I think was what they were concerned about with those kind of well-child visits, they were okay. We were able to get that through. So those are the highlights that I really want to emphasize. Some great things, some room for future improvement, and you better bet I'm not going to stop fighting on this stuff.
Bravo, Jessica, and all of your work. This is exciting. Tom, when the rubber meets the road, Jessica, the rest of our state representatives all across the nation, shout out to Buddy Carter down in Georgia. It has to make sense to you. It has to make sense to what a community pharmacy really does and what comes of this bill, rather than it just being this bill that works as it does and maybe didn't have you in mind and didn't have the community in mind. So expand upon that.
I've talked to a lot of different pharmacy owners and a lot of different state reps state senators about the bill. It's great that we could discuss the specifics of the bill, but the one thing that I just want to make sure everybody could appreciate is, this is something like I've been harping on for the past 12 years, and it's kind of, you don't see any action. So for Representative Behnam to actually, I give her credit, for learning about the topic. I own a pharmacy. I've owned the pharmacy for the past 12 years. I'll be the first one to tell you that I still am today learning of things that I didn't know existed, right? So it would be very easy for us to go and complain to our state reps. The state rep listens, shakes their head. Yeah, this is crazy. I can't believe it happens. But for 12 years, it's kind of just been like, yeah. And then once you have that meeting, it's over. What I love about this bill is you have bipartisan support that got it through the House, got it through the Senate, got it signed by the governor, right? So this movement of having legislators and having our community engaged to actually learn about such a complex issue, right? Like one bill can't solve this problem. One state can't solve this problem. One representative can't solve this problem. Collectively together, we need to educate the public as to why they should care and how it impacts them. Because quite frankly, it's so hard to understand that even when I'm talking to my friends that aren't in the pharmacy field, they're just like, Tom, I don't even know what you're saying. Like, change the subject now. Until they hear like you actually get paid less than what you buy the medication for to fill a prescription. How do you stay in business? Why do you do this? Like, why don't you just go and open a different type of business? But yeah, I mean, I just give so much credit to Jessica because, it's so easy to, they get bombarded with issues, healthcare. You could probably attest to how many different issues that they're getting hit with, education funding, staffing ratios. The list goes on and on. So to get somebody to actually take this bone and run with it, I think that this is what's going to make Pennsylvania and all of her colleagues on both sides of the aisle say, look, we do have a problem. We need to address it. One bill is not going to be able to address it all in one shot. But like she had mentioned the study, there's going to be a reason to circle back on the bill to say like, okay, of this, here's a study. Just having the opportunity to sit in front of her at the committee hearing and seeing her engagement, knowing that, she's engaging pharmacists across our state, hearing the stories. Just so much credit goes into her seeing it through the finish line. And I'm just curious, Jessica, like if you could just give a pharmacist maybe like a 3 to 5 minute breakdown of like how hard it is to get a bill actually passed, from inception to passed to signed.
Certainly. Yeah, it is not an easy process. I will tell you that. I think when we look at, on average, how long it takes to pass a bill through the Pennsylvania state legislature and have it become law, I think the average is 6 years. That's a really long time, right? And folks have certainly been working on issues around PBMs since before I was in the legislature. I'm a second-term rep, so I am in year 4 of my work in the state legislature, and folks have been working on this for, a decade plus, right? And I want to honor that work. It certainly previously led to things like the lifting of the gag order, for example. But this is the first time we've had such an enormous, comprehensive PBM reform bill move in Pennsylvania. And it was not easy. It took a lot of time and a lot of miles on my car. I've been in every corner of the state. I'm from Pittsburgh in Allegheny County. And I think the furthest I drove, honestly, was out to where Tom's from, out to Lackawanna County, on the opposite corner of the state, along that diagonal. And building that movement of pharmacists who cared about the issue, but didn't necessarily know how to break it down for legislators in a way that made sense, or didn't necessarily know how to break it down for a television camera in a way that was going to be compelling to their patients so that they could understand this really complicated issue. That, I think, is what led to the bill's passage. I stood next to people who the only thing that we agreed on was that PBMs were causing problems. We disagreed on every other issue, but on that we could come together. I've been in places like Northern Bedford Pharmacy, for example, which is in Bedford County and is literally like farmland all around. I didn't have cell service, right? So, places like that to places like Scranton or Erie or cities, Pittsburgh, or small towns like Ford City and Armstrong County, or the suburbs. I was out in Montgomery County. And so all of these places, I always say it's like same song, different verse. Right? The issues that the PBMs are causing, it's the same song, but the local impact is different. When a place like Northern Bedford Pharmacy is talking about a fear of closing, those folks would have to drive for miles and miles and miles to find another pharmacy, big corporate one or small at all, right? Yeah. Whereas, in my neck of the woods in Pittsburgh, if, say, my pharmacy closes, Spartan Pharmacy, it's not as big of an impact immediately. I would still feel the impact, right? I've got that relationship with my pharmacist, but there are other pharmacies nearby that I can go to. But if you're an older adult who relies on public transit or who relies on a particular radius around that pharmacy for them to drive your medications to you, that pharmacy closure, even in a city, can have an enormous impact, let alone, right, as we've seen 140 pharmacies since the start of the year, just in Pennsylvania alone, close their doors. That impact collectively devastating. And not, we talk about the healthcare impact of pharmacies, but it's more than that, right? Like my pharmacy, Spartan Pharmacy, they're sponsoring kids' baseball teams. Yep. They're marching in the Brentwood 4th of July parade, right? Like they're part of the community in a way that the big corporate chains just aren't. They're providing a level of service that the big corporate chains aren't. And that's what inspires my fight. I've been talking to all of these pharmacists from different places in Pennsylvania and learning their stories, working with them to leverage their relationships with their representatives so that they understand why this issue matters. Now, that's how we got it done. But a lot of time, a lot of work, and certainly, like I said, I've personally been working on this since about when I got into the legislature, and certainly, when the governor said in his budget address that he wanted to address PBM reform, I was like, hey, yeah, let's go. Like I'm in. I've been ready for this. Let's get it done. It definitely added that extra bit of fire that we needed.
Yeah, and I'll just say this because I think it could be easily not said, but I just want to thank you for being our champion, because for the past 11 years, I felt like all of my trips to Harrisburg, all of my letters to the editors, like I just felt unheard, right? So like being an American who loves our country and loves democracy, it was very disheartening to feel unheard. I finally feel like I've been heard. I posted something on LinkedIn where I just said vindicated. Like I just feel like the stories that we've been sharing with legislators and sharing with our community is finally, we finally got this big rock up the hill. How we get it down the hill now, like on the opposite side of the hill, is going to be determined. But, just thank you for actually listening and doing something about it, because it's been like an unwelcoming feeling that like I'm reaching out, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, but nothing happens. So thank you for that. You mentioned it, but like I just think like there's a definite reason that someone would use a chain pharmacy. There's a definite reason someone would use a mail order pharmacy. And then there's a definite reason someone would use an independent pharmacy. And then one of the things I preach is that the level of service that we offer, we're serving the most vulnerable citizens in our community. So we're delivering to them, we're organizing their medicines, right? Not every citizen in our community might need that service. Some people might just need to grab one prescription on their way home from work, grab a carton of milk and a birthday card, and hit their local chain pharmacy on the way home. That's fine. Some people might just get a mail order prescription because it's one thing and they get it for free instead of having to pay $5. That's fine. Who I need to serve, that doesn't work for them. They need a pharmacist that's going to look after their medicines, deliver to them, help them pick a Medicare prescription plan, answer their phone call at 7:00 at night because they have my cell phone. It's just we just serve a different consumer. And I think that's very important. I mean, I have colleagues and friends that work at a chain pharmacy or they work at a PBM, and we have our own disagreements. But at the end of the day, this is healthcare. Like, if that pharmacy in that remote area closes, it's medication for a person. It's not, oh, the pizza place went out of business, we have to make our own pizza tonight. Like this is life and death for people. But for some reason, I think like the explosion of the corporate pharmacies and the big box stores, they've kind of minimized the role of the pharmacist to the point where it's just like, well, any pharmacy could do this. No, they can't. So those are the things that I think we should just continue to talk about, because where the rubber meets the road is this poor old lady that can't drive to the pharmacy and can't organize her medicine and doesn't have anybody to look out for her at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, it's just great. I feel like we've gotten such great momentum. State of Pennsylvania passes this bill. We have the Federal Trade Commission looking into the PBMs. Yeah, the Congress Oversight Committee have a hearing with the 3 executives for the pharmacy benefit managers. I mean, quite frankly, I don't understand how it's not headline news every day, because the corporate greed, the money that's being stolen off of the American taxpayer is just wrong. But there's tons of great movement happening behind the scenes. And I'm just curious, what would you say the best advice would be for a pharmacist that does feel like, hey, I'm doing all the right things and I'm not seeing progress? Like, is there a different approach that pharmacist should take with his rep locally? Or, how could we become more engaged as pharmacists with legislators?
Yeah, so I always tell folks, when it comes to the legislative process, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And it can become really easy to be discouraged, right? Running a marathon takes a lot of endurance, and it's almost more psychological than it is physical, right? At the end of the day, it's both, though. And so when we're passing legislation, you have to think about it in terms of the long game. And you have to remember that your local rep may be incredibly supportive, right? Like I've met the folks all out in Lackawanna County there. They get it, right? But it takes a group of us to get it done. And sometimes your local legislator, while they may be supportive on your issue, might not be able to prioritize it. And I think that is a critical difference. I'll be honest with folks. I'll tell them, look, I have too much on my legislative plate right now to give this issue that you care about the attention that it deserves. I'm on board. I'll vote for it. And here's the name of the representative where this is their passion project. This is their issue area. Connect with me, keep me in the loop, but know that this is the person who's prioritizing that. And while I'm on board, I want to make sure that it gets the attention it deserves. And as one person, I can only juggle so many different issues. I've got a spreadsheet. I think I've got 25 priority areas on it right now, but they're organized in order of, how likely I think it is that we're going to see movement on this. What's my relationship like with folks, in the state Senate on this particular issue? And so understanding that we're juggling competing priorities too is really important. And it doesn't mean that we don't care, right? If somebody comes to me about an issue and they're like, oh, I'll point to landslides as an example, right? So I represent an area in Pittsburgh that's pretty hilly. We have our fair share of landslides. And when people come to me and say, hey, I've noticed in the state of Pennsylvania, we can't get landslide insurance. I'm like, you're right. It's an issue that I care about. And let me point you to my colleague, Representative Emily Kincaid, who has a bill on this issue. I'm a co-sponsor. I'm very supportive, but she's the one leading the charge. And so the key is, yes, develop those relationships with your local elected officials, but then also identify who's the person leading the charge on this issue. And then lastly, the unfortunate thing is that sometimes we lose, right? Sometimes we don't get it across the finish line. I've got a ton of bills that I've, had passed through the House, and they're not moving in the Senate, right? And sometimes it's really simple things. Like, for example, the Pittsburgh firefighters are the only class of municipality where if a widow of a firefighter remarries, she loses access to the pension. Nowhere else in the Commonwealth does this happen. I've got a bill moving to stop that, to make it the same as every other firefighter. And I've just acknowledged, we're running out of time in this legislative session. I'm going to keep fighting on it. Maybe there will be a miracle, and I'm certainly going to keep working. But sometimes you just lose. And sometimes you lose on those issues that should be no-brainers. And I'd argue that pharmacy issues are like that too, right? No matter where you live in the Commonwealth, you are impacted by your local independent pharmacy. And you're impacted by that local independent, even if you're not using them, right? Your community is still impacted by that. Your grandma is still impacted by that, right? All of this matters. And so the representatives who represent that area care about this issue.
That's great. It's just such great wisdom that I've never heard, like a little, peek behind the scenes of how it happens. And a lot of times we often hear about lobbyists. Like how does that impact you? If you could share it, maybe you can't.
Yeah, I'm certainly willing to talk about it. I'm always one of those people who is super frank about what is going on. I want to talk about lobbyists through the perspective of, I think, a misunderstood issue. You will hear people advocate for term limits for legislators. They'll say, oh, you should serve, 10 or 12 years, and then you should be done. And let me tell you, when that happens, the lobbyists and the staff become the issue experts on every issue. Do I think that there should be kind of a passing of the baton sometimes as a young person who, replaced someone who was substantially older than me in the seat? Yes. I do think that we need that generational shift. But if we mandate that, we hand power over to people who were not elected, who didn't have people vote for them. And I think that that's something folks should be very aware of. At the same time, I already think that lobbyists have outsized influence on the process. And that's something that we should constrain through a lot of different methods, whether we're talking about a gift ban or limits in the campaign space on contributions. I'm for all of that, right? And yet, I do think that there is a role for lobbyists. Sometimes folks forget that lobbyists are anybody who spends a substantial amount of their time advocating to legislators. So if you're spending, I forget the exact, but it's a certain number of hours per quarter, maybe 20 hours per quarter, advocating in front of a legislator in your professional capacity, you're a lobbyist. And so regular people can be lobbyists if they spend that much time every couple months talking to legislators. And there is a role for that. We need people who are coming to the Capitol who have knowledge on issues that we don't. And so, if we're going to talk about that, I think it's important to acknowledge there's still a role there. It's a role that I believe should have further constraints, but nevertheless, there is a role. And when we're talking about this issue, having somebody who is an experienced advocate who can navigate not just, my realm in the House, but also the Senate and the administration, that's important. That matters, right? That relationship building is critical. But it is not a role that has to be fulfilled by someone who is a so-called professional lobbyist. It's a role that anybody, if they take the time to develop those relationships, can fulfill. And, all that to say, there is still, I understand why organizations hire professional lobbyists. There's going to be a role there always. But you can have folks who are just regular people doing that work too.
Yeah, it's just great insight, because, I do think one of the issues is it does take some time to learn about these issues. So like hearing that you're only in your 4th year, I mean, I give you more credit than I've had, because, like I said, this is 12 years for me and I'm still learning of the issues. And I've met with, one of the things that I think her bill is excellent is really going to give the insurance department the autonomy to go in there and look at the books. I've met with, the Department of Health so many times, and they just said, Tom, we don't have access to what you're saying, what you're asking me for. So like they could see certain things, but the big, the goose, the golden egg is just covered and no one could see it. So, giving the Department of Insurance visibility into that, I think is going to be, what really keeps this ball rolling. Tom, what were your thoughts about the bill when you read it?
So, transparency to me means everything. So right out of the gate, if this bill helps to even the playing field for all pharmacies, regardless if you're owned by the insurance plan, or whether you are a mail order organization, if you can play on the exact same playing field from the price of a drug, so that your services and everything else that you do ancillary, which is where pharmacy care is going. It's not about the dispensing anymore. It's about the whole total treatment of the patient. And the pharmacist is the hub of healthcare in that space for that patient. And remember, these are tax dollars that are being spent on care. And why is that money that is taken from my pocket as a taxpayer, why is it going to the pockets of the PBM in the form of profit instead of pharmacy care?
Yeah, and the other thing about the bill is, like, you look at the copay differentials, like for pharmacy benefit managers, like they view it as a tool to steer patients to use them, which is fine. We may have patients who say, Tom, I'll pay more at your pharmacy for 90% of my drugs, but this 1 or 2 brand name drugs, and I have to get it in the mail, right? So what that does, though, is I lose the visibility to be able to check, like, for serious drug interactions, because now I don't know. Maybe the patient's getting 4 things in the mail that I'm not privy to. They're electing to buy their other 7 things here, so something even at, the copay differential. What people don't understand is that is jeopardizing their life. That's jeopardizing my patient's life, because I no longer have the visibility to know that patient's on that medication, or if they're getting a specialty medication from a mail order. I'm not privy to that information. And so many of my customers say, like, Tom, you don't know all, they think that we have some sort of resource that shows us all of the medications that they get somewhere. So people that just kindly fall back and put their trust in healthcare, I tell them, whoa, don't do that. Please advocate for yourself, because at the end of the day, we only know what we know. Similar to Jessica's role or Todd's role in our jobs, right? We're only privy to the knowledge that we have in front of us. And unfortunately, some of that information that the consumers think we have, we don't. So healthcare is supposed to be this very safe place that you could go and you could trust. But, that's the first message I tell my customers is, if you don't advocate for yourself, you're going to end up in a worse position than you are today. So the copay differential in the bill is huge. It could be easily viewed as, I just want the business, but I don't. There are many times where I'm at the counter and I say, listen, your copay on this insurance is very expensive. I think that you could find cost savings by getting it in the mail or from XYZ pharmacy. Why do I do that? Because I want the patient to take the medication at a price that they're going to be able to afford. I wish the copay was the same at my pharmacy, but unfortunately it's not. So the only way I could best serve my customer is to direct them to that mail order pharmacy. Do I like doing it? Nope. But I know that it's going to be better for my patient. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm here for. If I'm ever here just for my business, I'm not going to serve the community like I would in this capacity. So, copay differential, visibility for the insurance department to have that insight, the study to determine, are you truly doing what you're saying you're doing? It's just great. It's great momentum. It really has, given so many pharmacists hope that have lost hope, given like community members, so many people, they're like, Tom, what could I do to help you? What could I do to help you? I follow you. I follow your, your resentments against insurance companies and, getting them engaged. I really do just really think like the momentum that this bill has brought to our state is, and our state is a very important state, not only to us, but on a federal level. We're going to see that in this upcoming election. So, it's just very, very great momentum that we're going to be able to have with this bill.
Absolutely. And to return to something you said earlier when you were talking about, it could be seen as I just want the business. I mean, what I'll tell folks is this. In very few industries are people sad when their competitors go out of business. And let me tell you, community pharmacies are one of those industries. I have not heard a single pharmacist say that they're happy that the other pharmacies in town are closing. Right. I hear sadness, I hear frustration, because you all recognize that this is a system that works well together. And while sure, if your competitor closes, you may have more folks coming through your door, you recognize that the capacity needs to be bigger. And that other pharmacy was providing part of that capacity. It's important. And so I really want to emphasize that to folks, no matter where you fill your prescriptions, whether you're getting them through the mail, through a PBM affiliated pharmacy, through your local independent, through your grocery store pharmacy, whatever it may be, every pharmacist that I've talked to wants a system that's fair with a level playing field that keeps costs low to patients. That's what I hear. I don't ever hear anybody say like, yeah, I want to make all the money at the cost of my competitors, except for the PBMs, but even the PBM affiliated pharmacies, right? They're the loss leaders. And the reason that is the case is because it's all vertically integrated. When you have, for example, CVS that owns a health insurance, a PBM, a pharmacy, a specialty pharmacy, a mail order pharmacy, so on and so forth, and they're all
doctor's office,
right? And they're not alone, right? All of the big three and more have the same vertical integration going on. They can afford for their pharmacy to lose some money because they're making it up in other parts of that integration. And that to me is frustrating, because even when you talk to folks, pharmacists who work at the big PBM affiliated pharmacies, they wish they had more time to devote to that patient relationship. They recognize the role that they play and that it's different from community pharmacies. But, there's always that's what I'm looking for. The thing that's most important, no matter where the pharmacist is working, always seems to be the patient. Just always does. And
we had 2 pharmacies close locally, and people are like, well, that's great for business, right? And I said, no, it's not. But, you look at the one pharmacy, he's been open for 17 years. The other pharmacist was practicing for over 30 to 40 years. I said to my state reps, do you think suddenly that owner woke up on his 17th year of business and just absolutely forgot and failed how to be a good business owner? Like there's an outside force that's causing this, right? Like he's practiced for 17 years. He's ran a successful business, but suddenly he just forgets how to run a business. So I said, those are the things that we need to, you have to take that into consideration and think, well, suddenly this business that's been in business for 40 years goes out. Why? So those are the questions that we have to ask. And it's certainly not impossible, but it was very hard. We had to onboard like over 70 new patients to organize their medications. So what people don't understand is that's a lot of labor, a lot of, chances for errors when we're reconciling the customer's medication. So it totally disrupts continuity of care, which is one of the number one significant, factors in healthcare. We preach this continuity of care, but then we have a system designed to disrupt it on a daily basis. So it's frustrating.
Absolutely. But I'm hoping that my bill gives you all some much needed breathing room here, and we'll keep fighting for more.
a big difference in outcome between the state of Pennsylvania and Georgia. I don't know if anybody remembers, but I think it was earlier this year. Yeah, it had to be. Governor Kemp of Georgia made a last minute decision after a PBM reform change and bill came through. It came through the House of Representatives. It came through the Senate. Everybody was ready to go. It went to his desk and he vetoed and it fell apart. That, in comparison to Governor Shapiro, once again, applauding him for seeing what the citizens' voices truly wanted after the research was done, as our politicians speak on our behalf. And Jessica, bravo to you. And Tom, it makes me feel victorious as a citizen of Pennsylvania.
You look at Georgia, right? And I mean, where I think there needs to be credit is you have the House of Representatives that passed the bill. Then it went to the state Senate. They passed the bill, right? So you have, off the top of my head, I can't recall the number of state reps in Pennsylvania, but we have 51 senators, right? Is it 51?
50 senators and 203 reps.
203. So you have collectively 253 individuals that were elected by their communities to go and be our voice, right? My question would be to Georgia. How do you had a bill come through the state House and then the Senate, but then you veto it, right? So, I mean, you have to, at some point, being a leader, sometimes you just have to trust those underneath you. So, I do applaud Governor Shapiro because he said it early on. He said it prior to when he was campaigning that he would fight for us. So he said it prior. He said it while he was elected, because oftentimes we hear we're going to have your back, but then when they are elected, you kind of lose track of them. But yeah, I mean, Governor Shapiro, he has been an advocate for quite some time. I was actually honored. He visited our pharmacy when he was an attorney general. Just totally engaged. Very, very happy for his success. The leadership he exhibits is second to none. So I'm really hopeful that we can keep him in our wheelhouse. But federal officials might have a different.
Yeah, we will see about that.
Yeah.
But to be clear, I mean, the PBMs tried that misinformation here as well. They were literally running Instagram and Facebook ads in our districts, telling our constituents that my legislation was going to jack up their drug prices and that they needed to email us to oppose the legislation. And some of my colleagues got these emails from their constituents, and they came to me and they said, Jessica, what are you doing? I thought you said this was good legislation. And I said, yes, it is. Let me show you that the organization running these ads is a front for the pharmacy benefits managers. This organization's webpage was launched in, May of 2024. It's not incorporated anywhere as an entity. It is literally just a front so that the PBM lobby can lie to your constituents and scare you away from voting for this legislation. But because I had spent all of this time, I mean, I have a stack of folders probably yay high, and of just all of the information that either I have researched or pharmacists have handed to me, and that ability to know the details and speak back against the misinformation, it's not easy, but it's important, and that's how you win. Because if you can say, I don't know where they pulled this number out of, it doesn't show up in any of our data, it's not in our fiscal note, it's not in any of the research that we have done, they're lying to you, that's important. But it does take bravery and a willingness to stand up. I mean, I can tell you the PBMs and even some of the healthcare providers are not real thrilled with me right now. They're not real thrilled with the governor right now either. But it's worth it. It's really, really worth it, because at the end of the day, right, you're right, you have a choice to make. Are you choosing people and businesses in your communities, or are you choosing, big corporate special interests? And let me tell you, as an elected official, the pressure is there to choose the special interests. I choose every day to not do that, to be for the people. But regardless of party, you have people who sell out. And this was, to be clear, a bipartisan effort. Our House is controlled by Democrats. Our state Senate is controlled by Republicans. We had members of, Republican Senate leadership who were incredibly impactful. We had Senate Democrats who were involved as well. Of course, in the House, you had me, but you also had members of the Republican caucus in the House who were big proponents of this. You rarely see that. And I think that speaks to that movement of me personally going to people's districts to meet together with them, with their pharmacists, so that they could get it, so that they could really understand. And when you do that, you can really build that movement, bipartisan, bicameral, and then toss the governor in there too.
Yeah, and the true benefit of the bill, it's not independent pharmacies. The true benefit of the bill is all of the people that support community pharmacists, all of our individuals at home, people that don't really have a voice, or maybe they're most vulnerable, that, they don't know how to advocate an elected official. So, do pharmacy owners benefit from the bill? Yeah, but the biggest benefit is the consumers, our constituents of the Commonwealth. And, those are the stories that we just need to keep sharing, because you've helped so many grandmothers across this Commonwealth that aren't going to be able to say thank you. So I'll say it for them.
Well, that is incredibly kind. But I want to be clear, right? When you talk about pharmacy owners benefiting, you're not making big bucks, right?
No.
That's not what's happening here. Even with this legislation, you were losing money before. If you were lucky, you were breaking even, but more likely you were losing money.
Yeah, and I say this, a lot of people don't like to share financials, but the net profit margin, the net after all the bills are paid, our net profit margin is around 3% at the end of the year. So when I tell my friends that, they're like, why would you do that? Like, at the end of the year, you're only making 3%. So yeah, we don't. Many people are surprised to hear how little we make. Many people think like, oh wow, you own your own pharmacy, you must make so much money. It's not about the money. It's just a passion to help people. We employ like over 25 people. So you look at like how many households, that's 25 households, 4 or 5 individuals in that household. The impact is, it's much more beyond just filling a prescription, so, the ripple effect is going to be tremendous from the bill.
Oh, absolutely. Right. This allows you to survive. It allows you to do a little bit more than that 3%, a little bit more than that breaking even. And for some of the pharmacist owners I talked to who were liquidating their retirement accounts, or who were taking out a second mortgage on their home, right? For those folks in particular, nobody is making a lot of money off of this bill. Hopefully we're raking back some money from the PBMs and keeping it in the profits or in the pockets of patients. But what this is about is keeping you all in business, keeping you from closing, saving patients money, and, screwing the corporate monopoly that is PBMs.
I don't know. Are we in this for the money? I don't know, Tom. I think it's a passion more than profits for us.
It's a passion, right? It's not.
It is driven by passion. It's in my heart. I believe in what pharmacy can do to a society, and I'm seeing it. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, just like you, Tom. And Jessica, just a shout out to you. Thank you so much for caring about our state and where our tax money is going in order to care for the people within our state. And a shout out to you and your team. If there are other healthcare issues through the state of Pennsylvania that have anything to do with pharmacy care, make sure you get back here on the PBM Reform Podcast or any of our stations on the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
That'd be great.
That'll be fun. I always love when more folks come out to Western Pennsylvania. So, I've been out in your neck of the woods, and you can come out to ours. But, Todd, I really appreciate you having me on. This has been great. Tom, it was great to see you again. So it's been a little bit here, and I'm just excited to keep working on this issue. Now, it's been a quick and deep education for me on this topic. I'm looking forward to continuing to learn more, and I'm grateful to everyone who has advocated, because I could not have done this alone. This was not something that I just woke up one day and was like, cool, I'm going to walk into the governor's office with this piece of paper and now it's going to be law, right? It takes a movement of folks, and, you all are certainly part of that, and I am incredibly grateful. And of course, I can't end this without saying that we need our federal government to take action. It's great for Pennsylvania pharmacies that we've had some action on the state level, but we're somewhat constrained in what we can do at the state level regardless, right? So we need the federal government to act, because if you are in a state that does not have a PBM reform law on the books, you're in a rough spot. And even if you are in a state like Pennsylvania that's got this law on the books, the feds can do more, and we need them to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Tom, for being our guest on the PBM Reform Podcast, part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. This is the meaning of what it is to say Together RX, hashtag together, and take there at the end there, put an RX, and that is collaborative care, coming together as an entire healthcare industry. If you have anything that you'd like to share on our network, on a multitude of different shows, over 50 shows, number one, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Number two, reach out to me. Send me an email, Eury@pharmacypodcast.com. That's EURY @pharmacypodcast.com. And thank you for listening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
PBM reform is not a textbook process. This component of healthcare insurance will take time to figure out and will consist of many different players of the pharmaceutical supply chain. If you'd like to contribute information, data, or your own insights on PBM reform, please contact the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Send your email to publisher@pharmacypodcast.com or call us at 412-585-4001.